I've been driving for Uber for about 3 years now, mostly during the late night hours because that's when the money is better and traffic is lighter around the city. It was a Thursday night, sometime around 2:15 a.m., and I remember checking the time because I was debating whether to call it a night. The streets were nearly empty, just the occasional car passing by and the glow of streetlights reflecting off slightly wet pavement from earlier rain. That's when a ride request popped up. The pickup location was in a quieter residential area I didn't usually go to, but the fare looked decent, so I accepted it. As I got closer, I noticed the street was darker than most, with only one working streetlight near the end of the block. The GPS told me I had arrived, but I didn't see anyone waiting outside. I slowed down and looked around, thinking maybe they were still coming out. After about 10 seconds, I saw movement near the side of a house. A man stepped out from between two parked cars. He was wearing a dark hoodie with the hood up, even though it wasn't cold. He walked toward my car, not rushing, just steady. When he got closer, I noticed he wasn't looking at me or even at the car. His head was slightly tilted downward, like he was focused on something on the ground. He opened the back door without saying anything and got in. I gave my usual greeting, asking if he was the one who requested the ride. He paused for a second before answering, quietly, "Yeah." His voice was low, almost flat, like he hadn't spoken in a while. I confirmed the destination and started driving. The ride was supposed to be about 20 minutes, heading toward the outskirts of the city where things get more industrial and less populated. For the first few minutes, everything was normal, just quiet. I've had plenty of silent passengers before, so I didn't think much of it. But then I noticed something in my rearview mirror. He was sitting directly behind me, which already isn't unusual, but his posture was stiff. Completely still. Most people shift around, check their phone, something. He didn't move at all. What really got my attention was that his head was slightly tilted to the side now, and I couldn't tell if he was looking at me through the mirror or just staring into space. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the road, but after a while, I felt this growing discomfort, like I was being watched too closely. About halfway through the trip, he suddenly spoke. "Do you ever take rides that don't show up in the app?" I hesitated for a second, then told him no, that everything has to go through the system. He didn't respond right away. There was this long silence, and then he said, "Sometimes people need rides that aren't tracked." The way he said it didn't sound like he was asking anymore, it sounded like a statement. I laughed it off a little, trying to keep things light, but inside I felt uneasy. I told him I couldn't do that, company policy and all. After that, he went quiet again, but the atmosphere in the car had completely changed. I noticed he had shifted slightly, leaning forward just a bit. I could see more of his face in the mirror now, but it was still mostly shadowed by the hood. Then, without warning, my phone mounted on the dashboard glitched for a second. The GPS route flickered, and for a moment, the destination disappeared before popping back up. I figured it was just a signal issue, but right after that, he leaned closer and said, "You missed the turn." I glanced at the map. It didn't say I had. I told him the GPS was still guiding me straight. He let out a quiet breath, almost like a sigh, and said, "No, you were supposed to turn back there." That's when I felt something wasn't right, because I knew this area well enough to trust the route. I kept driving, ignoring him, but then I heard a soft tapping sound. At first, I thought it was something in the car, but then I realized it was coming from behind me. He was lightly tapping his fingers against the back of my seat. Slow, steady taps. It wasn't aggressive, but it was enough to get under my skin. I asked him if everything was okay, and the tapping stopped instantly. A few seconds passed, and then he said, "Pull over up here." I looked at the map again. His destination was still about 10 minutes away. I told him we weren't there yet. His voice changed slightly, more firm this time. I said, "Pull over." I didn't respond right away. I was weighing my options, trying not to escalate anything. The road we were on had gotten quieter, with fewer lights and no other cars in sight. That's when I saw him move in the mirror. Slowly, he reached one hand up and rested it on the back of my seat, just inches from my shoulder, and in a much lower voice he said, "You really should stop the car, right now." And that's when I realized I might have picked up the wrong person entirely. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, and for a second, I didn't know what to do. His hand was still resting on the back of my seat, close enough that I could feel his presence without him actually touching me. I tried to keep my voice steady as I said, "There's a gas station up ahead. I'll pull over there." I don't even know if that was true. I just needed to get somewhere with lights, cameras, people, anything. He didn't answer right away, and for a moment I thought maybe he'd argue, but instead he slowly leaned back into his seat. The silence that followed was worse than anything he had said. I kept driving, my eyes constantly shifting between the road and the rearview mirror. He wasn't tapping anymore. He wasn't moving at all again. It felt like the entire car had gone still. After what felt like forever, I finally saw it, a small, run-down gas station about a minute ahead, the kind that stays open all night but barely gets any customers. 2 dim lights flickered above the pumps, and there was a single car parked off to the side. I pulled in slowly, my heart pounding harder the closer we got. As soon as the car came to a stop, I said, "Here's fine, right?" He didn't respond. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time, I got a clearer look at his face. It was pale, almost sickly looking under the weak light, and his eyes, they weren't focused on me. They were fixed on something outside the car. I followed his gaze and saw nothing but the empty lot and the dark road beyond it. Then he opened the door and stepped out without a word. I watched him in my side mirror as he walked away from the car, not toward the gas station, but toward the edge of the property where it met a stretch of unlit road. He didn't look back once. The second he was far enough away, I locked the doors and grabbed my phone. My first instinct was to cancel the ride, but before I could, I noticed something strange. The trip was already marked as completed. I hadn't ended it. My stomach dropped. I checked the details again, and that's when I saw the destination had changed. It was no longer the industrial area from earlier. It was now listed as the exact location where I had picked him up. Same street. Same house. I sat there for a moment, trying to process it, when I heard a knock on my window. I nearly jumped out of my seat. It was the gas station attendant, an older guy who looked half asleep but concerned. I rolled the window down slightly, and he asked if everything was okay. I told him I had just dropped someone off and was about to leave. He glanced past me into the back seat, then looked back at me with a confused expression. "You sure?" he said. "I didn't see anyone get out of your car." My chest tightened instantly. I turned around, expecting the back seat to be empty, but for a split second, just a second, I thought I saw something shift in the darkness back there, like someone leaning out of view. I spun back around, my pulse racing, and before I could even think, I threw the car into drive and pulled out of the station. I didn't stop until I was back on a main road with actual traffic. I kept checking the mirror the entire time, but the back seat stayed empty. Eventually, I pulled over somewhere safer and tried to calm down enough to go through the app again. That's when I noticed the rider's profile. No photo. No ratings. Just a name I didn't recognize, and even that disappeared when I refreshed the screen. The trip was still there, but the rider details were gone. Like it had never been assigned to anyone. I ended my shift right there and went home, barely sleeping that morning. The next day, I tried to brush it off as some kind of glitch or misunderstanding, but it didn't sit right. So later that evening, I decided to drive back to the pickup location, just to see if I could make sense of anything. It took me about 30 minutes to get there, and when I turned onto the street, I immediately felt uneasy. It looked different in daylight, quieter, almost abandoned. The house where I had picked him up stood out right away. The windows were dark, and there was a worn-out, "For sale" sign on the lawn. I parked across the street and sat there for a minute before getting out. As I walked closer, I noticed the front yard was overgrown, like no one had taken care of it in months. I knocked on the door, even though I wasn't sure why. No answer. I tried again, louder this time, and that's when I heard a voice from behind me. "No one's lived there for a while." I turned around to see a woman standing on the sidewalk a few houses down, watching me. I walked over and asked her if she knew anything about the place. She nodded slowly and said the previous owner had left suddenly a few months back. No one really knew why. I asked if she had ever seen anyone around the house at night, and she hesitated before answering. "Sometimes," she said, "people say they see someone standing near the driveway, but when they get closer there's no one there." I felt a chill run through me as I glanced back at the house. The space between the parked cars where I first saw the man, it was empty now, just like she described. I thanked her and went back to my car, trying to shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. Before I left, I checked my phone one more time, opening the ride history. The trip from last night was still there, but the pickup location had changed again. This time, it wasn't that street anymore. It was somewhere completely different, a place I had never been, and as I stared at the screen, I realized whatever had gotten into my car that night might not have been tied to that house at all, and that meant I had no idea where it had really come from.